Hello, my name is Chris Wincup. I'm a clinical research fellow at the Department of Rheumatology at University College London. It's a huge honour to be invited to participate at this event. I'm sorry I'm not able to join you live currently for this morning's session, but I'm in our lupus clinic and I hope to be able to catch up for some of the live discussions later in the week. As you can see, my Twitter handle is there, so please feel free to contact me directly if you have any questions. So I'm very pleased to be able to kick off today's session, which is entitled A Primer for Beginners. And essentially this is to summarise social media for clinicians, researchers and for patients. Now, I do have a few declarations. I'm a regular user of social media, with Twitter, Facebook and Instagram being the most common platforms that I use. I also hold a couple of roles in European and British societies, mainly focusing on using social media in medical education. So, before we begin, I'd like to highlight the main topics of this talk, including what is social media, what are the most common forms, why is it important to clinicians and to researchers, what healthcare implications there are, cases of the effective use of social media, and why it's important to patients. First of all, some useful definitions. Social media, well, this is a website or application that enables users to create and share and publish their own content on a social network. Hashtag, this symbol usually precedes a word which is the key identifying message of a post. And viral is a term that's commonly used for a post on social media that's often copied, repeated and shared across many platforms. An example of something going viral is this image here. Many people have commented on the colour of this dress. So someone was in a shop and they looked at this dress and they said, look at this really cool gold and white dress. And they turned to their friend and their friend said, this is not white and gold, this is black and blue. And interestingly, I can only see it one way. People often debate with me it's the other way. And this picked up a lot of traction online just from someone going out shopping. And eventually 14,000 views of this image were happening a second on social media. And that's almost 1 million views per minute. So this is just an example of how something can go viral and people can see it. And a message or photograph or something can be shared very, very rapidly throughout social media. Now, the most common forms of social media that I'll talk about today are Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So first of all, Instagram. Now, this is a social networking app based on sharing of photos, and there's 800 million users will be using this in the average month, with 500 million users logging in on a daily basis. So that's a lot of people. Now, this data is slightly out of date, but the most popular accounts online until at least a few years ago was Selena Gomez, who had 135 million followers on this platform. Now, I'm slightly less good on this platform with less than 400, so please forgive me for that. So, taking Selena Gomez as a case study, she's a musician and she's an actress, but she used her social media platform to promote her health problem, which is highly relevant to rheumatologists, which is the field that I'm working in. And she used this platform to explain that she was diagnosed with lupus, and her lupus was severe to the point that she needed to have a kidney transplant. And you can see here that there was over 2.2 million likes, so someone's clicked and interacted with this. There's many more people who reviewed this. There was over 2 million within 2 hours. So this did a huge amount for the publicity of lupus, of transplantation, and explained the story. And a lot of patients I know did find it helpful to see the publicity that came with this. Now, as I mentioned, in comparison, I have fewer account follows, and my most popular post has a mere 13 likes, and this is from attending a football match with my dad many years ago, so I'm not quite as influential on this platform as a number of other people. Now, Facebook is the next account I'd like to talk about. This is an online social media and social networking platform. It was founded in 2004 and has over 2 billion users per month. So it's a huge number of people logging on to this on a regular basis. We know that there's almost 1.5 billion users on a daily basis. In Europe alone, there's more than 300 million people on Facebook, and the most common age group here is 25 to 34. It's been suggested that 5 new profiles are created every second, although maybe not all of those are true and genuine, and I'll be speaking about the pitfalls of social media more towards the end of the week. And finally, I'd like to move on to the third platform, and for me the most important platform for medical education and for clinicians and researchers, and that's Twitter. Now, this is essentially a micro blogging site where users post tweets, which is a short statement which can be anything up to 280 characters. People use these hashtags to identify a topic, and it's possible to follow one another, so to follow accounts you find interesting that can almost work like a personalized news channel where different things are updated in real time. Now, the most popular accounts for this, again, was headed up by musicians, but we also have Barack Obama, the former US president, in the top 3. So it's a very easy way for people to connect with one another. I do a little bit better on here than Instagram, but still, my numbers are not huge. So that's an introduction of social media. Now I'd like to introduce why this is important for clinicians. Now, social media is being used more frequently as an increasing way of patients voicing their opinion and communicating with one another. It's also useful for patients as a way of generating information, finding out about their illness and other possible treatments. A number of medical charities use it as a way of communicating the work the charity does, the support the charity offers with patient groups. And from a research point of view, people can often be using it to share data and promote collaboration. So for the clinician, I'd just like to highlight really as a main case study how this is being used in medical education. So I attended the American College of Rheumatology conference when it was in Chicago in 2018. As I mentioned at the start, hashtags are used to kind of chase messages and highlight content. And as you can see from this promotional photograph of the meeting, the hashtag is very prominent and at the front and center. And that's to allow people to discuss the conference online. So social media now plays a prominent role in conferences. People even arrange what's called Twitter meetups, which is where a number of people who are on Twitter can get to meet each other in real life. And I know this is true because this is me here at one of them. Now, with everything that's gone on with the pandemic and many meetings moving virtual, social media has played an increasing role in the communication of physicians and researchers attending conferences virtually. At the American College of Rheumatology this year, a subgroup of official tweeters and official Twitter accounts were set up, and I was very happy to be selected to be part of this, where the whole role was to communicate the key aspects of the meeting through Twitter. And it was a really interesting way to try and keep networking going, even though we were all physically in different parts of the world due to the fact that the conference was happening virtually. Another useful initiative is podcasts, and this is the Emunet podcast. There are a number of very good medical and rheumatology podcasts, which essentially allow you to download and listen to people either giving a lecture or interviewing a prominent figure, and you can download this and listen. So with conferences moving more virtual and learning happening more remotely, social media is playing a really key role in this. Moving on to thinking more about patients, I'd just like to give a short case study of how we've used social media to find out what patients think about research. So as a background, I'm a clinician, but I work in the lab. I'm currently finishing my PhD in lupus immunology, and an important thing for us is to find out whether what we're doing is of interest and useful to patients. Now, patient engagement is a really important thing for when we're applying for grants. We need to show that our research is relevant. However, doing patient engagement has a number of challenges. It can be very time consuming, it can be really expensive, it's difficult to find the right audience, in particular with rare diseases such as lupus and antiphospholipid syndrome. And I highlight this because there's been previous summaries of engagements between patients and clinicians, and these have been very, very expensive and often ineffective and fraught with a number of problems. So we wanted to see if we could do things differently. So we aimed to make a new method of communicating research with patients. We wanted something that was cheap, that could reach a huge number of people, and required very little time or effort, not huge intensity of organising large face-to-face meetings and coordinating people all coming together in real life. We decided that we would host a survey online using the frequently used survey website SurveyMonkey. We produced a lay summary explaining what our project involved in terms that patients could understand, and we used social media to share this message to ask people to participate in filling in our questionnaire. Importantly, we asked lots of relevant charities who look after the conditions that we were looking to seek the opinion of patients from, and that was mainly patients, in this case, with lupus and antiphospholipid syndrome. So, we developed a project in the lab that was going to look at factor Xa antibodies in lupus and antiphospholipid syndrome. So these were quite hard scientific questions, and we wanted to make sure that we could communicate this in the right way, that we could find out whether patients thought that this would be an important piece of research to do. So we developed the survey and a lay summary. We involved an expert patient to make sure that we'd asked the questions in the right way, and then we produced a very short questionnaire of no more than 9 questions. We didn't want people to be overburdened by fatigue from filling in such big questionnaires. We also put in a free text box for patients to essentially highlight anything else that they thought was important, or say anything that was not covered in any of the 9 questions. We used our existing contacts with some charities in the UK and patient support groups to set up the study and to share it. And we involved an expert patient in making sure that all of the questions were in a language that could be understood. And the kind of main components here, we use SurveyMonkey, as I suggested. APS Support UK and Lupus UK were both our charity partners who helped organise these steps. So this is just a graph to show you the responses to our survey, with time going along the bottom and the number of responses along the side. And as you can see, it was a relatively quick start, but that was because it was shared online by one of the charities. And so we saw a large number of responses initially, and this began to plateau and level off. There was a second increase very rapidly, and that was when our second charity shared online. And as you can see, we had a steady number of increasing responses. So in terms of outcomes, we achieved our goals. We had a high response rate. We were not expecting anything near 500 responses from patients. This was very cheap. It cost us a grand total of £29, which was a 1-month subscription to SurveyMonkey. And once we'd set everything up, the survey ran itself, so it was very little time and effort. We also found a number of priorities that patients felt in research, and that's informing future studies that we're going to do. And as a result, we've developed a much closer link with the charities, and we're currently feeding back some of the answers to questions that were raised from this study. In addition, we've repeated this in a number of other aspects, looking at pregnancy and rheumatoid arthritis, diet in lupus, and also most recently in the impact of coronavirus on our patients. And so we've been able to repeat this method a few times now. If you're interested, we were actually able to publish both the methods and the findings of this study. It was published in Rheumatology Advances in Practice. and that was also shared online, and I know there's a session coming up later in the week in terms of promoting research online, but we found this really useful and had over 1,000 people read our document within the first month of publication. Now, just to briefly talk about patient benefits from social media, I'd like to thank Melanie Sloan from the University of Cambridge and Paul Howard from Lupus UK for some of this information they've kindly shared with me. Now, there's been numerous studies showing social media does benefit patients in some surprising ways. So in this study, it was found that patients who use social media felt it provided them with support and emotional support, in particular in the context of chronic disease. There was also a feeling that it lowered the levels of stress and depression in patients with cancer, and a Facebook-based intervention increased the physical activity of young patients. So these are really interesting findings that this does directly help patients. Not all, and again I'm talking about pitfalls of social media later in the week, but there are some benefits here. In addition, there's been studies showing that an online community on the internet has helped improve wellness and adherence to a clinical trial with reduced level of dropout of patients who participated in a social media group, and engagement with Twitter within a subgroup of patients who are undergoing a weight loss program also said that they found the weight loss program more effective due to the network that they'd built. So, in conclusion, it is possible to successfully utilize social media to perform wide-ranging patient engagement, even for rare diseases like lupus and antiphospholipid syndrome. It's also useful to share results and data, in particular if publications are open access, and I know there'll be talks on this later in the week. It can help foster new collaborations and partnerships between charities, other clinicians and researchers, and other organisations. Patients often can report that social media makes them feel empowered and in addition provides them with support networks. Also has a key role in promoting awareness of a number of conditions, and so that it's an extremely powerful tool if it is used effectively. I'd like to acknowledge some people. There are far too many people who have helped me with the development of this talk and some projects that I've discussed. In particular, I'd just like to thank the people listed here, the charities and my funders, and there's my Twitter account and email address. If you'd like to contact me, please feel free to. Like I said, my main research is looking at lupus immunology, but if you have questions about social media, then please do, of course, get in touch. I'd be very happy to hear from you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference this week, and I look forward to being able to join you later in the week. Thanks very much.